welcome to the Purpose Pro Project podcast, where we keep it real about mental health, identity, and the stuff they don't teach you in school. My name is Derin Colakoglu, and today marks my first episode as part of the Purpose Pro team, where we will be doing a deep dive into understanding our brain, why it does what it does, why sometimes it feels like it's working against you, and how that's actually more normal than you may think. Today's guest is Dr. Ayşegül Güngör Aydin, assistant professor at the Biomedical Research Institute for New Jersey, and formerly the vice chair of the Rutgers Brain Health Institute. She's a neuroscientist who studies how the brain processes sound, how it adapts when things go wrong, and what all that means for mental health, especially for teenagers and young adults. We will cover everything from anxiety and ADHD to trauma, neurodivergence, and even her own struggles with pressure and identity. This episode is full of real talk, real science, and real advice that can actually help you take control of your mental health. Let's dive in. I guess kind of before we go into those questions, I kind of want to start simple. So what really inspired you to dive into like brain science essentially? And, was there really a moment where you were like, this is what I want to really do?
Actually, when I was a kid, I will always want to be a really funny story, an astronaut. And I was devastated. I remember exactly the day that I learned that I can't be an astronaut because I had a problem with my eyes and I get devastated. But my whole childhood was dream of being an astronaut, and then that dream followed by a basketball player, I was a professional basketball player back then in my home country. But I realized that I think during my elementary school, I would say, I really started to intrigued by the biology and how the biological organism live in the environment, and then how it affect each other, all of the organism. And then I started to realize that, okay, something happening under the really big organ control. It's the brain. And I started to read more and I started to learn more, and that's full of the huge interest of the brain. And I find myself into neuroscience. And that was the day that I dreamed of about all my life gonna be all about the brain, because brain is fascinating.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty great story. All right. So, now that we have the background, let's kind of dive into the questions that we're talking about. So, right now in our kind of society, with the current generation, a lot of teenagers often do feel misunderstood. So, could you try and explain really what's going on in the teenage brain that's really, intensifying these emotions and making them so difficult to be understood?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start with, of course, the teen brains are kind of middle of the major remodeling and try to figure out what is the best version of itself. And that plays a big role in the why they are feeling everything so intense. So, and I have to mention some concept that during I think 1960s, there was a scientist, McLean, and he brought that this concept of triune brain, which means that brain develop in three departments. I'm doing like that because I'm trying to refer.
Yeah.
So the first part is the limbic part of the brain, which process emotions and rewards more like kind of subtle things. And then that is the first part develop in early development. And then the second part is kind of the middle layer, which consists by hypothalamus and thalamus, like the other structure that control our thirstiness and sex drive and hunger, those kind of being a live kind of situations. And the last part develop is the prefrontal cortex, which makes us who we are, and which handles the reasoning, impulse control, and long-term planning, those kind of things. So when you start thinking about that, like this triune brain, so the teen brain, you can think about it started with the as all during the development, it started with the limbic brain, which all about the emotions, right? And this creates kind of mismatch between the emotional part of the brain and the reasoning part of the brain, and they are kind of try to tackle up, okay, what's going on, and try to regulate those emotion, and then still trying to take it under control. And I think that's what happening with the teenage brain. So when teen says you don't understand, or they are not entirely wrong, basically, because our adult brain and teen brain are totally different, because they are like beginning of their modeling, and then try to develop the other parts, and then try to engage the communication between those parts. But the adults, since they all developed and all brain structures on there, like I'm talking about hypothetically, of course, both teen and adults has all those brain compartments. But you can think about that with the teen brain, the most dominant part is kind of the emotional part, which is the first limbic part, and the teen adult brain is kind of dominated by the prefrontal cortex, which how we behave in the society, and how we are like doing our daily work, and so on and so forth. So I think that calls how our brain kind of wired structurally, wired experience the world with more emotional intensity than adults. So I think I kind of try to summarize, very scientific, but I hope it hit the message.
Yeah. That's all really interesting. But I'm kind of curious. So, like, at what age is the kind of shift when we stop seeing the teenage brain and it really starts developing into that like adult brain?
So it's a really great question, because still there are ongoing debates. So I think 10 years ago or so, we were thinking about when you think about the specialty of psychiatry, which is the child psychiatry. So they were seeing patients until 18 years old. But nowadays, I'm not a child psychiatrist, but they are trying to extend the population of the patient that they are seeing until like nearly 22, 23, because we are still thinking that those brain structures still going to develop, and the emotional part gonna be suppressed, but there's exactly no really cutoff point. I can't say that, okay, 20 is the time point that where we are seeing the shift, or sometimes the shift can be early and can be late, or it's totally depend on the people and the environment, both way, I guess.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. So I know you studied a lot about ADHD. So for someone who has like, ADHD or even like anxiety, how does their brain kind of hear and interpret the world like differently?
That's a great question, especially as an auditor neuroscientist. I really like this question, because most often I'm having this question. So the connection between how the brain process the sound and the mental health is way more deeper than the many people realize, because sound is not what we hear, right? Because when we hear sound, especially speech or emotionally charged sound, imagine a friend talking with you and explaining to what happened to that day, or maybe you are hearing a laughter or crying, shouting, whatever. Think about all of the things that you can hear in a daily basis. Our auditory system doesn't work alone. It's tightly linked all other structures, process the emotions and cognitive things, so like amygdala and hippocampus, or maybe prefrontal cortex. And these networks help us interpret not just what we hear, basically, and how we feel about them and how we respond. I'm gonna quote one of the scientists that I like her a lot, and I can also suggest her book. She's a professor at Northwestern University, and I'm gonna quote her thing. So she's always telling that in her book or podcast or even the lectures. So the sound is not what we hear. It's all about how we see, how we feel, and how we interact with the world. So it's not about the auditory stimuli, because brain is not, or auditory system is not working in isolation. It's all about the communication between the other brain structures, like as I referred before, like prefrontal cortex and amygdala and how we remember. When you hear a song, suddenly you get more emotional, right? Because you hear the song, yeah, obviously you are hearing, your ears are perfectly working, but you also get more emotional because there is a link between the auditory cortex, how you hear and process the sound, and with the hippocampus, how you keep the memory. And when they talk to each other, now you feel something different. It's not about the song, but how you feel. So it's, I hope I convinced everyone who listened to this podcast is that auditory or sound is not only sound, it's how we hear, how we feel, and how we interact with the world. So understanding how the brain process sounds give us a window into, I think, the mental or emotional well-being, in some cases, new ways to diagnose or maybe treat mental health conditions.
Wow, yeah, I never really knew that about the person. It was very interesting. Um, so I know alongside that, you've also studied autism pretty closely. So what's something that a lot of people, especially teenagers, don't really understand what it feels like to, be autistic and have autism?
Yeah, so I just want to make it everything something clear. So I'm an autism researcher, but I'm working autism in a rat model of autism. So I'm not working
Mm.
with the human patients. So I mean, of course, during my training, I saw like patient with autism and I interact with the people, and I saw, of course, during my course of training, I experienced so many different variety of the flavor of this disorder. So one thing most people, especially teens, so don't realize is that the being or diagnosed with the autism, or that the patient with the autism isn't just about how someone acts on the outside. It's deeply about how they experience the world on their inside. So it's a different experience. So it's not they're acting out, vice versa. It's all about how they're experiencing the world. So for many people with autism, so the world can feel way more boosted sensory information. For example, it might be like louder sound or brighter light condition, and so much fast moving like environment, and this is more confusing. And imagine in everyday situations, so the patient or people with autism, they walk into a bar or cafeteria which had tons of noise, and they are trying to follow a group conversation, and they are trying to keep up with the conversation.
Yeah.
And suddenly they are being touched by their friends and so on and so forth. And those are all overwhelming, like tons of sensory stimuli at the same time, like bombarding the brain. And so not because they are being overly sensitive or dramatic, because their sensory and social processing system work differently. It's not so autism is not lack of empathy or intelligence. It's a different way of experiencing the world. So it's all about how they experience the world, end up those kind of these kind of symptoms, I guess.
Got it. Yeah. So I never knew it was very like internal and all the conflicts. Yeah. Um, so moving away from, I guess, kind of more conditions, I wanted to talk a little bit more about trauma. So
Mhm.
is there a big connection between like types of trauma, like whether that's bullying, abuse, neglect, things like that? Is there a connection between that and how the brain starts processing sound and stress?
Yes, I mean, the short answer definitely yes. So there's a powerful connection between trauma and how the brain process both sound and stress. And there are so many different researchers, and there's like much literature about that, how the early trauma or early childhood trauma can affect your adulthood life. And also the chronic stress can be also change your brain. And when someone experiences chronic stress or a trauma, maybe it can be like early childhood trauma, and it can be neglect or bullying. It can be everything. So their brain adapts in a ways that they meant to protect themselves, right? Because our main thing to be survive whatever we are experiencing. So when you try to survive, your brain adapts what's happening or surrounding you, and then try to keep you alive. And those changing can make the world feel harsh or unsafe, or even later in life because your brain kind of changed. It changed itself to protect you, what's happening around you, so that you can keep going on alive. And the trauma can affect the development of the prefrontal cortex that I mentioned and referred earlier during our interview, is that which is the brain structure can help the reasoning and calming you down to all of the emotions, and the hippocampus, which is the helps put the events in a context. So this makes it harder to tell everyone the difference between what's happening then and now. So you kind of lose the structure but in the context. So the past experiences, you can feel they're happening in life. So especially when triggered in a sensory stimuli. So imagine a scenario, or the veteran. So they went in a horrible war condition, right? And they're every day experiencing the door bombarding and sound and everything so intense, right? And when you come back in a real life, so now your brain only learned that to keep yourself alive, the sound is harmful. You have to avoid that. And this is the only thing your brain knows. Now your brain trying to protect you, but now you're not in a war anymore. You are now in a real world and with the real people and nice, but out of blue, you are hearing a sound and then you are just triggering, and that's loud sound can trigger all of your memory, bringing all of the hippocampus, and you can lose the contact now and then, or what it was before, it wasn't before, and then because your prefrontal cortex kind of changed during the wartime, now you can't calm yourself down. So it's all about how your brain trying to protect you, and it changed you because of the trauma or the early on stress and so on and so forth. So you can experience everything differently. So imagine a sound is normal for other people, but it's not normal for you because you experience something totally different in earlier of your life. So your brain trying to keep you alive and then shift itself and rewired itself so that you're experiencing in a totally different concept.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how the brain, holds on to that for a really long time. Really interesting. So, I had another question. It's about neuroplasticity. So, could you kind of explain what neuroplasticity is, and does it really mean that our brains can heal and adapt?
Absolutely. This is my favorite question ever because I'm a neuroscientist who is really interested in the neuroplasticity and how this neuroplasticity can be beneficial. But first, to put it in a concept of what is neuroplasticity. So it's the brain's ability to change and adapt and rewire itself in response to experience, learning, or even injury. So, but at the same time, it's kind of two-edged swords, because it can be harmful or it can be beneficial or helpful, right? So your brain is very dynamic. It's not static. It's not how it is, and it's not definitely not staying in the same way every day. So because every day we are experiencing the world, and when we experience the world, it's all about rewiring your brain every day. So, and with the time and consistency, with the right environment, it can grow, adapt, and even heal. And then you can think about just like previous questions. So you have a trauma experience, you have densely experienced a trauma, and then your brain rewired itself. And then now you're in the real world, but now you have a PTSD, which is the post-traumatic stress disorder. But now, the neuroplasticity can be very, very beneficial because it can help you to rewire your brain again, and then it can help you to change your brain, and it can help you with the healing process. In people with PTSD or early trauma, even subtle sound can be misinterpreted as a danger, as I explained why. But that doesn't mean that trauma doesn't leave the emotional scar. So it can, with the neuroplasticity, it reshapes how it hears, and a brain can start to rewire itself toward healing. So when the next time you hear the sound, it might be not as harmful or danger alert as before, because your neuroplasticity, your brain structures stay the same, but the connection between the the structure can change. You can change it. So you can think about this communication as a communication cable or Ethernet cable. So think about two different, or even like make it easier, think about two electrical station, and there's a one cable between these two station, right? And the brain's kind of like, it's again analogy, but you can think about the communication change between two different brain structure. But there's a way that we can change these cables route, and then we can, when we change those route, that cable goes to another direction, so that you are not hearing the same sound as danger as before. So the neuroplasticity can be very more beneficial. But again, as I mentioned, it's kind of a two-edged sword, so it can be the harmful as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot about how the brain rewires and its ability to change over time. So how do you think consistent and positive relationships, something like mentoring, would help shape that brain development, and especially for teens who experience trauma?
Absolutely. So this is great question, because when you think about the neuroplasticity, it's all about the rewiring, right? And when you take the same route every day, the first day, if you don't know the way, you are putting your phone on the coordinate or whatever the address on your Google map, right? And then you are following that road. And the second day, you are also putting one more time. Third day again, and fourth day again, and then fifth day again. And a week later, your brain knows it, and you don't need to put the address. So why I'm giving you this example? Because the mentoring might be the kind of similar way to increase the positive or like beneficial neuroplasticity or rewiring your brain, so that when you have mentoring, so that can guide you or supervise you to find the right connection, and then not only finding the right connection or directing to right connection, also with the consistency, you can increase the boost their cable route, so they are not only like weak connection. You can boost the connection when you have the same thing over and over again. You can think about this when you start playing an instrument. It's very challenging at the beginning, but over the time it's getting easier and easier and easier. So the mentoring and the supervision is kind of the same way. At first, maybe for the first time, for the mentee, it might be overwhelming, right? Because mentor or the supervision that you are receiving is that, okay, it's too much for me. But over the long term, it's super beneficial, because first, it helps you to put in the right direction or right guidance, and also with the consistency, you are increasing your guidance and or effectiveness of the right route. So it is more time that, like the long-term range, it's super efficient or beneficial for the mentees, so finding the right guidance, right paths, and right route, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I actually have more of like a personal question for you. Were there ever moments throughout your life where you struggled with your own mental health problems or identity? How did you push through that?
Oh, it's a great question. So I can say I think two different times. So since we are focusing on the teens, so I can refer one of the time that I have really challenged during my high school times, I guess. So again, I think back then, of course, I wouldn't know any of those, so I wouldn't know that my brain is not developed yet, right, on the right time. So I was really frustrating about what's happening around me. I mean, imagine like high school, being like adolescent is hard, right? Word is hard. And I think those are the time that I only find playing basketball was helpful. And that was my gateway, I guess. Whenever I find myself very frustrated and very sad, very depressed, I always play basketball. And it always helped me. It always helped me. I find myself again. And even after maybe 10 minutes, like just running inside the basketball court, it helps me a lot. So those are the time that I think how became or overcome those kind of situation like basketball.
Yeah.
But that was for me.
I think that's a great story. So, So what are any like final thoughts? Because wrapping up, so what are any final thoughts that you have that you would like to leave for all the teens, young adults, parents, or even mentors who are watching the podcast?
So I think for the mental health, I mean, there's no like golden rules, I guess, for because it's different for everyone. For example, the last example I gave you was the basketball, right? It can be anything for everyone. So, but I think the overall or common goal is that the doing an exercise just daily, whatever it is, it can be walking, it can be running, it can be whatever it is for you. Just try to escape your emotion, not the escape maybe, but just give a pause about what's going on and then try to relax your brain and then try to bring the normal baseline. So maybe just 15 minutes exercise or whatever it is for you, just do that. I think it's common for human being, I guess, as a species, because our ancestor just was running in the all of the jungle, right? So we are not used to sitting all day long, but nowadays in the real world, a new world, this is all how adults are doing, like or teens or everyone. So just sitting like in front of the computer or phones, but our brain doesn't evolve in that way. So we have to remind ourselves that, okay, we have to get away with something else. So it can be like 15 minutes daily, whatever perfect for you might be I think, super beneficial for your mental health.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, thank you, Dr. Aydin, for
Of
all your
course,
time and insights into these matters. It was such a pleasure having you on the
it
Purpose
was
Built
great. Thank you for
podcast.
having me. It was
Uh,
amazing. Thank you.
and with your permission, I'd love to have you come back and share more of your highly
Sure.
relevant thoughts with the audience.
Of course. Of course.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to Professor Aisha Gungar Aydin for breaking down the science in a way that actually makes sense and for being so open and sharing her own journey. For those of you who want to take a deeper dive, I dropped a few show notes below for today's episode, which will help you learn more about Professor Aydin, her background, research, ongoing thoughts, as well as learning more about the brain itself, things like mental health, neurodivergence, autism, and sensory processing. Till next time, if there's one thing I hope you take away, it's just this. Your brain isn't broken. It's just trying to keep up. And with the right tools, it can adapt and grow in ways you might not even understand or believe. If today's episode is on target for you, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow us for more real conversations about mental health, identity, and how to survive the human condition. Take care, and I'll see you on my next episode of the Purpose Pro Project.